Not too long ago, buying an electric vehicle felt like buying into the future. Every major car company on the planet was racing to build one. Startups were appearing overnight with bold promises and flashy concept cars. Legacy automakers were setting ambitious deadlines, fully electric by 2030, by 2035, some even sooner. Showrooms were filling up with new models. Magazine covers were celebrating the death of the gas engine. The momentum felt not just real but unstoppable. Fast forward to 2026, and something has quietly shifted. You walk into a dealership today and the selection feels noticeably smaller than it did 2 years ago. Some models you remember seeing advertised, models that were hyped up with big marketing budgets and celebrity endorsements, are simply gone. Brands that were loudly promising an all-electric future are now whispering about hybrids instead. This is not the story most headlines are telling you. Most coverage zooms in on whether Tesla is up or down this quarter, whether some tax credits survived the latest political battle. But the deeper story is more layered and more revealing than any single news cycle can capture. What is happening to the American EV market in 2026 is not a simple collapse, and it is not a simple success story either. It is a market that was pushed forward faster than the conditions could support, then pulled back by a combination of forces that most people never saw coming. Chevrolet discontinued the Bolt EV and the Bolt EUV in 2023. These were two of the most affordable electric vehicles available to American buyers, genuinely accessible cars that working and middle-class buyers could actually consider without financial gymnastics. Ford revealed it was losing over $130,000 on every single electric vehicle it sold in early 2024. When you are losing that kind of money on each unit, the business case for expanding your EV lineup does not just weaken. It collapses. Fisker, once celebrated as a serious Tesla alternative, filed for bankruptcy in 2024. Rivian burned through cash and narrowed its focus. Volkswagen canceled a $2 billion EV factory. Honda and General Motors walked away from their joint EV development project. Line them all up together, and the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. The American EV market is not just experiencing a slowdown in sales growth, it is experiencing a genuine contraction in available choices. The menu is getting shorter. Building an electric vehicle is still more expensive than building a comparable gas-powered car. The battery can account for anywhere between 30 and 40% of the vehicle's total manufacturing cost. Battery prices have been falling, but not fast enough. The average electric compact SUV costs over $53,000 while the gas-powered version averages around $35,000. That is close to a 60% price difference. For most families stretching a budget, that is a door that simply does not open. When manufacturers cannot build affordable EVs profitably, they move upmarket toward luxury and premium trims where the margins are better. The expensive end of the EV market gets more crowded with vehicles that most Americans cannot afford, and the accessible end gets emptier. The federal tax credit was supposed to be the door built into the wall. Offer buyers up to $7,500 back on a qualifying new electric vehicle. Close the price gap artificially until battery costs fell enough to close it naturally. Every change in administration brought fresh uncertainty about whether the incentive would survive the next budget negotiation or executive order. And that uncertainty did not just affect buyers. It affected manufacturers making capital decisions worth billions of dollars over multi-year horizons. While Americans are navigating a shrinking selection of electric vehicles at prices that remain stubbornly high, buyers in Europe, Southeast Asia, and Latin America are experiencing something almost completely different. They have access to a rapidly expanding range of affordable electric vehicles, some starting below $15,000. Chinese electric vehicle manufacturers, led most visibly by BYD, spent the last decade investing heavily in battery technology and manufacturing scale at the same time, driving down costs through volume in a way that no American or European manufacturer has been able to replicate. In 2024, the United States raised tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles to 100%, effectively doubling the purchase price of any Chinese EV before it even reaches a dealership. The most affordable and most varied electric vehicles in the world are simply not available to American buyers. The global EV market is expanding in terms of affordable options at a meaningful pace. The American EV market is contracting in terms of affordable options at the same time. US buyers are choosing between expensive domestic EVs and a narrow band of premium imports, while consumers in dozens of other countries shop from a dramatically fuller and cheaper selection. The United States charging network is growing, but it is growing unevenly in a way that creates serious commercial complications for manufacturers. California has over 50,000 public charging stations. Mississippi has around 400. That is not a minor regional variation. A car with a shorter range might be perfectly practical in Greater Los Angeles. That same vehicle becomes genuinely unreliable in rural Wyoming or central Mississippi, where the nearest fast charger might be 80 miles away. So manufacturers engineer for the hardest use case: bigger batteries, higher costs, higher prices. Countries with denser and more consistent charging networks have seen far broader ranges of EV models enter their markets precisely because manufacturers can serve urban buyers with smaller, cheaper vehicles. America's size and infrastructure patchwork makes that kind of product diversity much harder to sustain commercially. Electric vehicles have become politically charged in America in a way that has no real equivalent anywhere else in the developed world. A 2024 survey found that 70% of Republican voters said they were not likely to consider an EV for their next vehicle purchase. Among Democrats, 56% said they were actively considering one. That is a 55-point gap on a car buying decision. Refrigerators do not have a 55-point partisan gap. Washing machines do not. But EVs do. And the gap has been widening rather than narrowing as the cultural conversation around them has intensified. Elon Musk's increasingly prominent political presence added a specific complication on top of the broader partisan divide. Tesla's brand identity has become politically radioactive in a way that is costing its sales across the ideological spectrum simultaneously. A struggling Tesla does not just hurt Tesla. It sends signals throughout the industry. Ford has reported multi-billion-dollar losses from its EV division and responded by delaying and canceling several planned models while redirecting investment toward hybrid vehicles that carry lower development costs and are proving more commercially durable with mainstream buyers. General Motors cut its 2024 electron volts production targets nearly in half, from an original goal of 400,000 vehicles down to somewhere between 200,000 and 250,000. Volkswagen cancelled its major German EV factory investment. The dominant strategy emerging across the industry is not a full retreat from electrification but a pivot toward a middle path. Hybrids and plug-in hybrids that allow manufacturers to meet emissions requirements, satisfy environmentally conscious buyers, and maintain profitability without fully absorbing the costs of an all-electric lineup. The casualty of that middle path strategy is product variety at the affordable end of the market. The mainstream buyer, the person shopping for a practical family vehicle somewhere between $25,000 and $40,000, finds an EV market that has less to offer them in 2026 than the industry promised them just 3 years ago. Global EV sales reached 17.1 million units in 2024, exceeding what analysts had projected. That is not the sales figure of a dying industry. Year-over-year growth has slowed from around 50% in 2023 to around 20% in 2024, and that deceleration sounds alarming until you place it in context. A slowdown to 20% growth on a much larger base is not a warning sign. It is a normal maturation pattern. The growth curve always flattens as markets develop. That is not failure dressed up in statistical language. That is how markets work. A 2024 Gallup poll found that 44% of Americans would still consider buying an EV in the future. Nearly half the country. The conversion problem is not a desire problem. It is a conditions problem. The specific American problem is not a global absence of EV demand. It is a set of local conditions that are making it harder to convert interest into purchase. Prices are still too high for too many buyers. Incentives are too unstable to plan around. Battery costs are still declining on a trajectory that most analysts believe will bring EVs to manufacturing cost parity with gas-powered vehicles within the next few years. The charging network, however uneven today, continues to expand year over year. The average American drives 37 miles a day. The average modern EV can travel 250 to 400 miles on a single charge. The fear does not match the reality. And as more mainstream buyers gain first-hand experience with EVs, that gap between fear and reality tends to close quickly. The honest picture of the American EV market in 2026 is not a market in collapse. It is a market caught in a genuinely difficult transition, squeezed between structural problems that are real but solvable and a political and policy environment that has made solving them harder than it needed to be. Every year that affordable EVs remain out of reach for mainstream buyers is a year that the people who could benefit most from lower fuel costs and simpler maintenance are subsidizing a transition they cannot yet afford to join. Americans are not losing EV options because the technology failed them. They are losing options because of a specific and identifiable combination of forces. Stubbornly high manufacturing costs, unstable incentives, trade policy blocking affordable options, an uneven charging network, political polarization, and manufacturers recalibrating through caution. Some of those forces are already easing. Battery economics are improving. Infrastructure is expanding. Several manufacturers are quietly developing new affordable models for later in the decade when the cost structure may finally support them. But some of the forces are human choices rather than technological inevitabilities. They can change faster than battery chemistry if the will to change them exists. The question that nobody in this conversation seems to want to answer directly is who actually benefits from keeping American EV options limited. Because someone does. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think the EV market recovers for mainstream American buyers within the next 5 years? Or has this window already started closing?